And today, the jury learned more about what was found at the scene and also the suspected murder weapon. Now, we do want to warn you, some details in this story may be disturbing. KLTV7's JD Conti reports.
It was something of mass trauma. It was not something that was small.
Smith County investigator Tim McDonald was the first officer that arrived to the hospital on July 4th of last year. He counted 11 rounds in the truck Eli Sanchez and his friends were driving in when they took a wrong turn, leading them past Serafino Batista Rentierra's auto shop.
Obvious signs of massive trauma, hemorrhaging. There was a lot of blood in the backseat and brain matter, what appeared to be brain matter.
McDonald teaches new police officers on how to tell families a loved one has died. In this case, that's what he had to do.
You're not going to cushion a blow that devastating to the family. You're not going to.
McDonald detailed the search warrant executed on Batista's home and business. Dozens of weapons were recovered. That included AK-47s, a grenade launcher, and body armor.
In fact, we got one of these plates here as well.
Smith County crime scene analyst Emily Graham also displayed her photos from the search. Both she and McDonald had no reason to believe any of the weapons were owned illegally. Batista's attorney questioned Graham's findings on bullet trajectory, arguing again that he never intended to kill anyone. Graham told the jury they recovered $100,000 in cash. She also took photos of shell casings, saying she found several different kinds at the scene. JD Conti, KLTV7 News.
Now, if convicted, he faces the possibility of life in prison.